Is this the real deal?
Yes, this is the real deal.
How are you?
I'm doing well. I hope you are.
Good. So is everything coming in okay so far on that end?
Yeah, it looks real good. Everything was quick and easy.
Good. Well, I don't know what I was more excited about, talking to you or talking to somebody who understands the struggles of rural Wi-Fi connection.
Isn't that the truth?
Okay, and how many books did you write? I'm going to make that part of the intro.
14.
14. Okay. All right, so I'm just going to get straight to it. I'm going to do an intro, and then I'm going to ask you all the questions I can in 1 hour. It is the Shepherdess at Harmony Farms, where we encourage you to think big, start small, and don't quit. We have as our guest today Mr. Joel Salatin, a founding father of the Regenerative Farming Movement in the USA and author of 14 books surrounding the topic. Mr. Salatin, welcome.
Thank you, Grace. What a delight to be with you. Thank you.
Okay, primer. So as a primer, just explain generally the difference between conventional farming and what you guys do there regeneratively at Polyface.
First of all, I would say when we try to contrast, let's say, just orthodox conventional American agriculture with what we do, I would say the first thing is that we build soil rather than reduce soil. So as a result of our being here, we want there to be more soil, not less soil at the end of the day, at the end of a lifetime. Yeah. And as you know, most of American agriculture is working still today at an overall net soil depletion situation. So what we want is more soil. Number two, I would say in general, we want more water in the landscape. We want to hydrate the landscape rather than size from sucking out of the stream going smaller and smaller. What we want is we want to have more water in the landscape. We call that increasing the commons, if you will. So more soil, more water. I would say in general, we want more diversity on the landscape. So instead of being a monocrop, a monoculture, a monospecies, what we want is lots of different species, both plants and animals, working symbiotically rather than in a linear reductionist idea of simplicity and singleness of mind. So number four would be, if I have an animal that gets sick, I don't assume that it's some disease fairies sprinkling dust down onto my farm and making my animals sick. I'm assuming that it's something I've done to break down the wellness habitat, the immune system. Now, it could be that I chose the wrong animal, genetic weakness. It could be that I crowded them. It could be that I made them unhappy. It could be that I didn't feed them right. It could be that I got them too cold, too hot, too wet, too dry, a million different things. In general, we view sickness as simply a report card on our management, not something to vaccinate, medicate, and do a bunch of interventive type things. Number five might be that we view life as biological and not mechanical. The orthodox view in Western agriculture is that life is fundamentally mechanical. So we can take some DNA out of here and we can take some genes out of here. And it's essentially, if we can manipulate life like we can a copper fitting or a PVC valve, well, that's all fine. And we believe that life has fundamental distinctive sacredness to it, in that there's a reason why a tomato is like a tomato is, and a cow is like a cow is, and a sunflower is like a sunflower is. And those nuances, they are designed beyond our understanding. Right. So we want to respect the pigness of the pig, the chickenness of the chicken. We just want to respect that phenotypical distinctiveness of the animal as being fundamentally valuable, not only valuable for what we can make it do for us. Mm-hmm. Number six is that the fertility program runs on carbon. So we run a carbon economy, not a petroleum economy. Now, I know that in the pure sense of the term, Petroleum is also considered carbon because it's, oil is supposedly old, decayed leaves or whatever. But in general, what we want is real-time solar-driven carbon to run our fertility, as opposed to chemical fertilizers and centuries-old carbon. We want to have a short chain between the solar energy turned into a plant, turned into microbes in the soil. We want that chain to be as short as possible, not a long chain, which is what most farming does. And if I could just finish with number 7, we're just brainstorming here. Number 7 might be, we believe that farms should have a lot of people on them, or we should have a lot more farmers as opposed to fewer farmers. Western American agriculture is predicated on the notion that farming is an obsolete, low-paying, drudgery vocation that only C- to F+ students should be able to do. And if you're an A or B student, you should go to town and be a doctor or an attorney or a IT, in your Dilbert cubicle at the end of an expressway. And we believe that fundamentally land is better cared for, loved, and caressed when there are more people on it who are familiar and viscerally intimate with the land's desires and nuances. And so we think that we would actually have a stronger food system, a more secure system, a stronger civilization, actually, if we had more farmers. And I'm not saying everybody has to be a farmer. I'm just saying more farmers in general, more farmers to certainly today than we do. Right now in America, we have twice as many people incarcerated in prisons as we have farming. And I would like to at least see that number inverted.
Yeah, right. So to double back on that, would you say from your perspective that regenerative farming doesn't require the continual increase of inputs that conventional farming seems to be?
Yeah, certainly in general, there's a resource leveraging that happens. Now, that's not to say that you don't have to do some pretty significant capital investment to prime that pump. For example, let's take the water. I'm a pond guy, man. I mean, every time we get a few $1,000s, we dig another pond. And we have 10 miles of buried water line that gravity feeds from permaculture style ponds up on high ground and gives us 70 PSI water all over the whole place from gravity. No pumps, no electricity, no nothing. Now, that's many thousands of dollars in excavation and in piping to make that happen. But we don't have to worry about electricity. As long as gravity works, we have wonderful, pressurized, clean, gravity-fed water all over the whole farm. And so some of these things take a substantial amount of human capital, creativity, input to get them going. But the beauty of this is, how long does a pipe in the ground last, and how long does a pond last? Hundreds of years. So you make this initial investment, and then it just continues to carry on for, a long, long time. As opposed to the chemical farming approach, which is, it's like a factory. It's like input, output, throughput. We like to view the farm more like a great big reservoir where there's all this energy coming in and a real slow leak going out. So the reservoir just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. In conventional farming, it's like an assembly line where material comes in one end, goes out the other, and you don't actually get any buildup of resource. You don't get a buildup of capital inside. It's just a flow through proposition.
Yeah, you're sort of mining in a sense rather than investing.
Certainly, or at least just getting the same out that you put in. It's a flow through. Yeah.
Right. Okay, so second question is, it's two questions that are kind of floating in the mainstream. Is regenerative agriculture profitable? Or do regenerative farmers have to exchange significant profit margins in order to make, the sustainable choices?
Yeah, well, you're certainly hitting on a nub in our movement, that there's this tension between environment and economy. And if you help the economy, you have to sacrifice the ecology. And if you help the ecology, you've got to sacrifice the economy. There's that kind of tension. And I understand that tension. Our sense is that is only true if you don't put all of the economics in the equation. One of our favorite phrases is the phrase spin-off costs, uncaptured costs. For example, if we don't use antibiotics on our chickens, and so we grow a chicken with no antibiotic resistant superbug, for example, well, then that has consequences in the medical field, because now you don't have MRSA, you don't have C. diff, and you don't have superbugs because you haven't developed antibiotic resistance on the farm. So if the conventional farming community had to pay, for example, for the dead zone the size of Rhode Island in the Gulf of Mexico, if they had to pay for the extra water purification that comes from tainted aquifers, I mean, I could go on. I think half of all cases of diarrhea are caused by foodborne bacteria. I mean, what's a case of diarrhea worth? Okay, and so if the industry had to pay for all of those ancillary costs, then we would find out that a regenerative food in the total picture is actually cheaper than the cheap food that creates a problem that then has to be fixed some other way. I think it's a pretty amazing thing that in our culture, as smart and creative as we are, we have not figured out how to create, in gross domestic product, we've not figured out how to create a cost to error. So, Wendell Berry writes about this when he says, what's good about us creates less GDP than what's right about us. In other words, look, if you get married, you live in one house and one person stays home and you have a milk cow and you get by with one car and you don't buy much, that's a wonderful family economy, but it doesn't help the GDP. What helps the GDP is if you get divorced and move to town and live in two houses, now you need two cars, you need to go to the psychiatrist because you have mental breakdowns, and you probably have to get pharmaceutical drugs because you're under stress, because you're divorced, and you can't see your kids all the time. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's a profound cultural weakness that we cannot capture the true negative costs of error.
That's so true.
If I go out here and dump pesticides in the river and it becomes a Superfund site, the cost of cleanup is not net GDP. It's, oh, look, we've got to hire people. We got to buy gas. We've got to get money. We got to get, machinery in here. That's an amazing thing. I mean, building a prison actually increases the GDP. That ought to be a negative figure on GDP. So you actually come up with a balance sheet that honors and appreciates cultural positives as opposed to cultural negatives.
So it really takes an enlargement of your perspective, sort of a heart for stewardship,
yes,
and really a long-term way of thinking.
Right. Long-term and broad-based. Long-term and broad-based.
And that's when regenerative agriculture becomes its most profitable, is thinking in those contexts and understanding that conventional is not cheap as we see it.
That's correct. And what's the cost of lost soil? I mean, right now, as you and I are speaking, every bushel of corn costs us about 2 bushels of soil. How can you keep doing that? And so those costs are real. And if you look at, farm prices and ag statistics, you realize that, for example, if related to labor costs and insurance and land costs, if the price of a cow today had kept pace with insurance, wages, land costs, things like that from, let's say, 1960, today a McDonald's hamburger would cost about $30.
Right. Do you think like with the escalation of inputs that conventional farming requires, do you think 100 years from now, it will be more expensive to farm conventionally than the person who did the groundwork today?
Oh man, that's the one thing I don't do, Grace. I don't do prophecy. Many of us in this movement, we thought we'd hit the boundary before now, but boy, nature is very resilient. It takes a lot of abuse. and still, still kind of plug along and keep going. So I do think that the proverb, if you keep going the way you're going, you're going to end where you're headed, is probably true. And so here in the United States, we've got, supermarkets and all this stuff. And the notion that we could actually turn into a beggar food nation is a pretty far stretch, for some people. I think that that's a long way off. I think what would be sooner than us running out of food is running out of health.
It's already happening.
Yeah, it's absolutely already happening. 40 years ago, Americans spent 18% of their income on food and 9% on medical care. Today, it's 18% on medical care and 9% on food. So those two numbers have completely inverted in 30 to 40 years. And of course, COVID is just bringing this into more obvious play. And the fact that there were empty supermarket shelves this spring as all these big centralized processing plants, had to shut down for a few days, for the first time in my life, I felt a national, literally a cultural aha moment as people realized, oh, you mean this food system is actually a little bit failed, that it was the emperor has no clothes moment. And that was pretty exciting for those of us who have been wanting to go a different direction. And we had people in our sales building there in April. They said, man, I would have never given you the time of day. But when I went into, Kroger's and saw nothing on the shelves, I said, here we are. And, we're never going back. That's a very exciting thing for me.
Yeah, I think that we had probably one of the grandest opportunities at a wake-up call. And as long as I can remember. So it is good. And you have the choice to do things with that wake-up call. You can go back to sleep or you can do something.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I can remember for a lot longer than you can remember.
Right. Yeah. I didn't think you would battle. All right. So the second question floating around in the mainstream is regenerative agriculture scalable?
Sure. Is it scalable?
Yeah.
And it certainly is. This doesn't have anything to do with scale. It has to do with management. And a lot of people would consider us a fairly large farm. I mean, according to the USDA, we're a large farm. We'll jump over $3 million this year. I mean, we're running 1,000 head of cattle. So these principles, they scale. But beyond that, I would like to just touch you, Grace, with the idea that rather than scaling up as a single entity, the way we see scaling is not necessarily scaling up as an entity, but scaling up through duplication. And there are two ways to scale. One is to scale individually, build an empire, and the other is to scale with way more participants.
Right.
Either one of those works.
So when you say straight up, explain that a little bit, build that out.
All right. So for example, let's say that I want to have a chicken processing facility. Okay. I want to do chicken processing. Well, the current model is I want to have this processing facility that does 100,000 chickens an hour with 3,000 employees in a central location. All right. Well, we would rather see thousands and thousands of outfits that would do maybe 1,000 or 2,000 chickens a day, very small, in every community.
Right.
So you do the same number of chickens. It's just that rather than bringing them to 50 mega facilities in the nation, you bring them to 100,000 community-based facilities in the nation for processing. I mean, that's an example, but the same thing can be done, for all these. I mean, people say, oh, pastured chickens. How could you possibly feed the planet on pastured chickens or pastured pigs? Well, I was in Lincoln, Nebraska a few years ago, and that to feed Lincoln, Nebraska, which is not a huge city, to feed Lincoln, Nebraska, I think I figured at the time that it would take 100 or 200 farmers like us, within driving distance of Lincoln, Nebraska. Could that be done? Absolutely. It could be done everywhere in the country. It would just take more people in the countryside. And I think that would be a very healthy thing to actually reverse the urbanization of the country and bring some of these urbanites back to the country to actually participate on our ecological womb.
So it's sort of a matter of the initial perspective. It's the decentralization. It's the understanding that sustainability is the goal, not centralization.
Yeah, you could call this a democratization of the food system if you wanted to be a little bit, politically correct.
Right.
But yeah, I prefer the idea of duplication rather than empire building.
Right.
So what we want is
rather than Polyface ending up a 3,000 acre farm, you'd rather see 100 different, 300 acre farms like yours.
Yes.
Or smaller, whatever it be.
Yeah. Now that being said, there are economies of scale. The phrase economies of scale, many people in the kind of the homesteading movement, they don't like even that phrase. They want to argue, oh, that's the industrial phrase. That's the Cargill phrase. But the fact is, there are economies of scale. Just because we raise 100,000 chickens does not mean we're a Purdue, Cargill, or Tyson. There's a lot of room for what I call mid-scale, where you get economies of scale. So it's not so tiny that it's inefficient, but it's also not so big that you have pathogen problems. Those are the two ends of the spectrum.
Yeah. All right, that's good. That's good groundwork. So from there, you've told us we can farm. We believed it. We're starting to farm. Now, where do we get our customers?
Customers. All right. First of all, make a list of your tribe. Right. And so if you were going to find people in your community who thought like you, where would you go? Mm-hmm. And generally, people like you and I, we wouldn't find those people down buying food at the Sheetz filling station. We wouldn't find them down at the Walgreens pharmacy getting, a bunch of medications. Generally, where you and I would find customers is we would find them in the wellness community, the CrossFit gym, the Weston A. Price Foundation chapter, the acupuncturist, the chiropractor, all quacks, the iridologist, the herbalist, the naturopath, the functional medicine doctor. I mean, think about wellness community. That's where you're starting. And so you have to identify your tribe so that you don't just waste your time on people who are eating at McDonald's.
Right.
And zero in on people who kind of believe like you do.
Right. That's good. Yeah, that was one of the first things I did, was I went to those closest to me. And that provided, for me personally, enough of a foundation to say, okay, I can get out there and I can buy this many, and so on and so forth. So, and then past that, at Polyface, in those first years, did you do farmers markets? Did you hit the streets one-on-one? How did you get that foundation, that startup?
Sure. Well, we had three approaches. The first one was we gave samples. Samples work. There are two ways to get a customer for us. Mm-hmm. One is they need to see it or they need to taste it. You need to see it or taste it. So we either need to get them to the farm or get them to eat it, and preferably both. But if you only have to pick one, you pick one or the other. So we gave a lot of samples, and we still do that. We still give samplers all the time, because when people taste it, eat it, they, ooh, this is different. This is not, this is not from the supermarket. So samples. Number two, we did educational programs. So, every community has all sorts of organizations that meet. We used to have Ruritan and, Kiwanis clubs. They're kind of gone now, but they've given way to other kinds of groups like CrossFit gyms. There are all sorts of groups and they meet, environmental groups. Okay. And they meet, and they're always looking for an interesting program. And so I put together, in those days, it was a Kodak carousel with a, slide projector. But today it would be a PowerPoint, put together a PowerPoint on how we can heal the planet with pasture-based livestock. Mm-hmm. And people just warmed up to it. They just loved it. And then of course at the end, it was a soft sales pitch. If you want to participate, here's where you can. And so we did that kind of educational outreach. And then the third thing we did was what I call evangelism, and that is where we rewarded, we didn't advertise anything, we rewarded people who spread word of mouth for us and created that buzz. And so it was examples, education, and evangelism. And our culture, Grace, our culture is starved for appreciation. It doesn't take much gratitude from somebody to get whole society now. And it doesn't take much. If you walk in a store and they act like you're really important,
Right.
you're going to send more people to that store, you know.
Yeah, I've been there.
Yeah, I've been there, done that, huh?
So has your model changed though? These are the foundational things. And as you've grown and the times have changed, have you guys changed your model? And what are the major ways you've done that?
Yeah, certainly times have changed. I mean, the internet has changed everything.
Right.
And so now we have our Instagram and our website and all that stuff and blog. And beyond that, we've actually put in a children's playground here on the farm, you know, teeter-totters, tire swings, corn box, living teepee with, you know, Kentucky Wonder beans growing up poles that kids can get in and that sort of thing. And real picnic tables so families can come and eat. The point is that we have to become a destination place for people to come out and enjoy the farm. You know, as a related issue here, there are a lot of dollars, Grace, that are being left on the table right now.
Maybe that's it.
Ah,
this is a world of second chances.
There we are. Hey, I was just trying to call you on the phone. Yes.
All right, I still have 17 minutes. I'm not giving up.
Okay.
All right. So you cut out on we're leaving a lot of dollars on the table.
Yes.
I want to hear.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So we're leaving a lot of dollars on the right now in the entertainment and recreation industry. And so what we're seeing is a real need, but people want to do things. They want to go places. And so if we have a farm that is beautiful, that has animals that are fun and docile, there are few things that are as, you know, as enjoyable for an urban child than, you know, than picking up a chick or picking up a baby lamb or whatever. And these are invaluable memories and experiences for folks. And so if we can get them to leave their dollars with us, whether you do a hay ride and charge for it, or, you know, a barbecue and charge for it, or have a little mini concert and charge for it. The point is to make our farms a focal point of gathering and fellowship in a time when people don't want to go to the city.
And it's an element of diversification beyond adding more animals to your farm.
Yes, yeah, agritourism. Listen, a lot of times the value of the emotional memory, that value is actually more valuable than the T-bone steak or the pound of hamburger.
Right. I mean, my siblings and I still talk about going to the cider mill, you know, when we were 8 and 10 years old, and we remember that. So yeah, that's really, really true. Okay, so bringing it to diversification, you know, it's Polyface, the farm of many faces.
Right.
Would you say that diversity is key to profitability on farm, or can somebody make it just doing sheep or just doing beef, just doing chickens?
All right. The principle is you need to be the one that controls the sale. Then you own that customer. And of course, customers want more variety, they want more choice. And whether your venue is a farmer's market stand, an internet shopping cart, or a on-farm place, they want to have more options when they come, whatever your venue is. And so the hard part in marketing is getting the customer. Once you have the customer and they're loyal, they want to know what else you have. It's a lot easier to get a $200 customer with another product than it is to have a $100 customer and take that $100 customer with another $100 customer. What I'm getting at is you don't have to be the one that grows everything. So if you come to our farm store right now today, you will see a whole pile of products from kombucha to soup to homemade cosmetics, soap, honey. I mean, you'll see all sorts of things, milk, cheese that we don't do on our farm, but they are local food crafters that when a person buys from us, they can tap in to this whole greater community of food craft and fiber craft. So the goal here is to, as much as possible, become that one-stop shop for your local artisan food craft and fiber craft community. And since you are the conduit, the brand, the sales conduit, you own the customer.
Right. And so that customer who might be $25 customer with just beef becomes a $200 customer with beef, cheese, kombucha, probably like some type of shirt. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So that's your case for diversification. And then, the person that's aiming at, their first $50,000 a year on farm, they'll need that many less customers if they do have that diversity.
That's right. It's a lot easier to find 100 customers that will spend $1,000 with you than 1,000 customers who will spend $100 with you.
That is a true case for diversity right there, in a way that's really easy to understand.
Yeah, it is. Whether you produce it all, or you produce as much as you can and you work with other people to produce it. Yeah, the diversity is a big deal. It sure is.
Do you think that we as producers need to be as much educators as anything with respect to educating people on why they should buy this way, why they should buy our stuff?
Well, of course, Simon Sinek wrote the book Starting with Why. Right. And he has the concentric circles. Everybody knows what they do. Some people know how they do it. Very few people know why. But that's what your customer wants. Your customer doesn't want to know. They don't know. They don't want to know what you do, and they don't really care how you do it. What they really want to know is why. And they need to know why. Here's a critical thing, Grace. They need to know why in their context, not your context. See, we farmers, we get all excited about the why of what we do. I'm building soil. I'm making happy animals. I'm, creating carbon. I'm blah, 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 all this stuff. Well, the customer doesn't care about any of that stuff. She wants to know, how are you going to make me have healthy kids? Exactly. How are you going to eliminate my doctor's appointment?
That's good.
How are you going to make it easy for me to get supper on the table when I don't come home from work till 5 o'clock? So all of our messaging and marketing messaging, and I'm going to confess, this is the hardest marketing thing for me to do. I actually have to sit down. You almost have to get into a yoga pose, okay, I'm going to become my customer, and you have to think about the life and the thought process of your customer. Put yourself in her shoes, and notice I'm using her. All of our customers are all she's and hers, and I got to put myself in her context, because I've got to meet her needs.
Yeah.
She wants to know, why should I buy from you and not somebody else? Right. Well, it's because I can provide you better nutrition. I can provide you a better taste, happier children, whatever.
Right. There's so much emphasis on sharing within the marketing realm, on sharing your story, but it really kind of becomes about the customer story to sell the product. Really, you need to get engaged with what's going on and what their needs are. So their story, not ours.
Right.
So much. I mean,
Well, our story needs to intersect their need.
Okay.
And if my story does not intersect their need, then we're not relevant. We're not relevant. The only way you get relevant is for me to meet their need.
Yeah. Right. Otherwise, you're just entertainment. You don't sell.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
We would like to think that people want to see more soil on the planet, right. But that's pretty far down. They really want to just see They just want to see food on the table and happy kids.
Right. That's that's golden. All right. So would you agree that occupational regenerative farming is a marathon? How would you encourage stamina in those who are either just starting out or are in their first 5 years?
Oh, what a great question. That is a great question. All right, so stamina. So there's another question related to this that I get asked all the time, and that is looking back, if you could change one thing, what would you change, or what would you do differently? And so my answer to that is that I would not think so independently for so long. We farmers tend to be pretty independently minded, hermit. I'm going to do it myself. We don't feel like we can pay anybody else to do it, and so I've got to do all this. And what happens then is that we end up doing a lot of things that we're not good at, and we end up being very inefficient because we're doing things we're not good at. And of course, for most farmers, this is marketing. Most farmers are not good marketers. In fact, most farmers don't even like people. Okay. So if you happen to be a farmer, who likes people, you're in like in the top 10%. Okay. You're in the top 10%. You're already, weird. All right. So what I'm getting at here is that you want to be able to bring to yourself partners. If you're familiar with the business book StrengthsFinder is all about, instead of trying to overcome your weaknesses, instead leverage your strength. And so what you do is you make a list of what you are really good at, what you like to do. There's a kind of a universe of 3 things here: what you love, what you know, and much of our objective in life is to try to spend more and more time where those 3 universes intersect. See, the problem is most people are good at things they don't actually like. 80% of Americans hate their job. All right. So you're really skilled at something you don't even like. Okay. And so the point is, identify that sweet spot for you, and then you're looking for partners. You're looking for partners who can come and fill in those weak spots, because their sweet spot will be different than your sweet spot. And when you let them leverage their sweet spot and you leverage yours and you come together, that's when 1 + 1 = 5. And that's what we're looking for here. And so if I could say one thing to beginning farmers, it is, don't be so cotton picking independent. Be quick to ask for partners and helps, and not formal partnerships, but handshake partnerships and things where you can come together and share risks. And if you're not good at welding, we'll find a good welder and trade him a chicken. And that partnership, the relational stuff is so powerful, so important.
So you cut out a bit on the 3 strengths. You said what you love, what you know, and what you're good at. Is that what you said?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
What you love, what you know, and what you're good at. That speaks of knowledge, skill, and passion. Mm-hmm. And where knowledge, skill, and passion intersect, that's your life sweet spot.
Mm. So that's just a general tip for avoiding burnout, even. I mean,
yes,
because that's a real thing.
Yeah, no, that it is. And you generally don't burn out at something that you really, really love. You burn out on the edges of having to do the things that you're not good at and don't like, in order to spend a little bit of time doing the stuff that you really like. Right. And that's where your burnout occurs, is out on those edges. Yeah.
Right. All right. So we are coming to the end here. And before you leave, are you optimistic about the future of regenerative farming in the USA?
Yes, I'm very optimistic about it. Not only do I think it's the answer, I think it's the only real answer, long term. Now, when our society will begin to recognize that, I don't think anybody knows right now. But absolutely, God's design and God's principles for how this whole ecosystem is supposed to work, the cleverness of the human mind is not going to overcome. We can cheat for a while, but eventually creation is going to exact its balance sheet. And when that happens, God's principles will be the ones that will stand the test of time. They always have, and they always will.
Right.
And so that's where we have to.
Yeah, amen to that. One more thing before I say goodbye. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. So I have
here.
an idea for the 3 M's for success on pasture, right? And,
Yes.
Okay, mowing, mobbing, moving.
Yep.
Okay, you should add a 4th one, and it's
Yep.
marketing. How do you feel?
Ah,
Love it?
yeah, that's fair enough.
The book about it, just quote me, okay?
Okay, I'll be sure to credit you in it.
Okay,
Yes.
Thank you. Well, sir, I do not take your time for granted. Thank you so much for taking an hour and talking to me.
Oh, you're welcome, and I'm delighted. You're a joy to talk to.